Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra Buswell, and today I'm going to be discussing my research paper on Frances E. Willard, the leader of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Through the development of temperance organizations, women were able to advance abstinence legislation that shifted women's roles within society. Through the revival and evangelism during the Second Great Awakening and the growth of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, Willard was able to successfully link numerous social reforms, such as women's temperance, home protection, and labor legislation to the temperance movement, successfully thrusting America towards prohibition. The Second Great Awakening began in the 1790s and stretched through most of the 1840s, increasing church membership through mass revival meetings. These gatherings were also known as camp meetings that were held in small towns as well as large cities and led to an increase in the number of converts for the Baptist and Methodist churches. Both of these religions became vastly popular due to their ideals on salvation through faith alone. And religious leaders of the time traveled to these camp meetings in an attempt to boost religious worship in a time where religion wasn't very important to people. A major element to the Second Great Awakening was the dominance of female-to-male converts. Between the years of 1798 and 1826, there were at least 3 women converts to every 2 male converts, making roughly 3/5 of the New England population female. Religious conversion was youth-oriented, with most revivals occurring between the ages of 12 and 25. Predominantly composed of young unmarried women. By forming a direct relationship with God, women were able to bypass men's authority and stabilize their identities by becoming active members in revival meetings. Because of women's religious activity during the 18th and 19th centuries, they were able to create early temperance societies. These organizations emerged during the 1830s, causing in large numbers women to be attracted to these issues of temperance, since most often they were the victims of men's drinking. Many temperance societies, as well as mothers and wives, began requesting that men sign temperance pledges promising to abstain from all alcoholic beverages. One of the temperance pledges can be seen on this slide to the left, the picture. This is what was used back then as a way to promise temperance. The main arguments made by the Crusaders were that men who drank often spent money on liquor instead of saving that money for the home, and time spent in saloons was time that was not being spent with the family. The Crusaders viewed alcohol as an addictive substance that destroyed a man's ability to work, which led to impoverished families and caused fathers and husbands to become violent towards their families. The creation of the Washingtonian Society in 1840 expanded the influence of Christian values and was the first major temperance organization formed independently from church beliefs. The Washingtonian Society popularized temperance and led to the development of the Martha Washingtonian Society. While it lacked organization, the Washingtonian Society influenced the establishment of the Daughters of Temperance, which in turn created the Women's Christian Temperance Union in 1874. The Women's Christian Temperance Union took on national recognition, dividing into chapters on the local and state levels throughout the country, as well as internationally. When it came to the question of liquor, the organization was concerned with an individual's ability to control their urges and live an abstinent lifestyle, causing the leaders of the organization to emphasize the need for moral sanction, adopting a wide range of reforms to do so. The Women's Christian Temperance Union shaped the views on domestic and international reform on major political, economic, and social issues going on during 19th century America. The Women's Christian Temperance Union's longevity would not have been possible without the accomplishments and leadership of Frances E. Willard. Frances E. Willard was elected the second president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in 1879. She did have prior leadership experience before this. She was the president of Evanston College for Ladies in 1871 and later became the first female dean of Northwestern University in 1873. However, by 1874, Willard left the field of education to pursue her interest in the temperance movement. This same year, she became a member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union and was elected the secretary for the Temperance Society. After being appointed the organization president, Willard traveled around the country giving speeches or lectures to help advance the temperance movement and gather public interest in social reforms. According to the Washington Post, Willard was a proficient speaker. Quote, "There was a rich music to her voice with varying inflections and innovations at will, with sustained monotone were the most effective." End quote. As president, Willard incorporated multiple aspects into the temperance movement, such as women's rights, home protection, and labor issues. In her earlier temperance work, Willard made it known temperance was not a war to be fought only by an organization's members. Willard believed that this was women's war, meaning mothers, wives, and daughters must be involved as well. Willard enabled far-reaching reforms and encouraged women to become active agents of change. In her 1874 speech entitled "Everybody's War," Willard argued that for the safety of democracy, the nation required ballots to be cast by clear, rational thinking citizens rather than those who, quote, "stagger up to the polls." Willard's beliefs on the importance of women's rights played a central role in successfully linking women's suffrage and temperance. She argued that the only way to secure abstinence would be by securing and receiving the right to vote. By expanding the organization to encompass the suffragist movement, membership in the society increased. Willard argued for votes or signatures for petitions, stating these should be required before the sale of alcohol could be granted. This became known as the Home Protection Ballot. In her speech entitled "Home Protection," Willard, with the increase of consumption of alcohol, warned a new source of power, the vote, was needed. With the success of the Home Protection Ballot, Willard endorsed her Do Everything policy, which extended temperance to include every social reform movement. Following the Do Everything policy, Willard allowed the Women's Christian Temperance Union to become actively involved in politics. There was growing dissatisfaction in the Women's Christian Temperance Union that led members of the group to form a third party as a way to organize and have a real influence on the public. This political party became known as the National Prohibition Party, which emphasized women's suffrage and temperance reforms. Outside of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, Willard organized the Home Protection Party, believing this would allow for women to enter into the Prohibition Party. These two organizations eventually merged, creating the Prohibition Home Protection Party. This third party was established to bring women who could not vote into politics. However, it was not a way for women to influence the political process. Unfortunately for Willard and the organization, the Prohibition Home Protection Party did not last long, and it reverted back to just being the Prohibition Party. Willard did try to enter politics again by entering the Populist movement. She hoped to fuse the Populist Party with the Prohibition Party, but because of differing ideals on women's rights and temperance, they were unwilling to merge together. Home protection was seen as a way to enforce moral code or social purity within families and their homes. During the late 1890s, the organization started campaigning for curfews for young people. Through the efforts of the organization, over 4,000 towns in the United States had curfew restrictions for people under the age of 18, and in some cases, they had them imposed on people who were under the age of 21. The organization believed that poverty was one of the main threats to home security, and that men were contributing factors. Men could easily abuse their wives and children who were dependent upon him, neglecting the needs of the family and causing greater family issues. The organization pointed out repeatedly that women could do little to nothing when it came to being abused or mistreated by their drunk husbands. Members of the organization soon realized that some women were forced into bad marriages, mainly for economic gain, and would find themselves tied to their drunken husbands for life, since divorce was looked down upon. Willard argued men should take on a larger role in family life and allow for women to enter into politics because only females would be able to have the influence to see to it that laws pertaining to home protection would pass. After Willard's death in 1898, the New York Times celebrated her contributions to social reforms. Quote, Willard taught the world that women lose none of her best attributes, her gentleness, influence, her strongest hold upon the affections of husband or children, neglects none of the sweet home ways because she realizes that life holds for her responsibilities to humanity which she dare not ignore. The Women's Christian Temperance Union stopped supporting and endorsing women's suffrage, as well as home protection and labor reforms, and reverted back to being an organization centered solely around temperance. Under Willard's leadership, the Women's Christian Temperance Union expanded temperance to include all types of reform and successfully linked them together to bring in more membership. Through Willard's work, she opened the door for women to become more involved in political life and held what she believed women's interests were at utmost importance. Without her, the contributions and successes of the Women's Christian Temperance Union would not have been as successful as they were to start the Prohibition. This is just a list of some of the sources I used for not only this presentation, but also for my paper. These were some of the best ones for more information on Frances Willard herself, as well as the organization. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great day.